For 23 years, I had been the ghost of Christmas dinner. Not the spirit that brought joy and wonder, but the invisible force that made everything happen while everyone else basked in the holiday glow. My name is Sarah, and until last December, I was the family's designated holiday workhorse, a role I'd inherited not through choice, but through a combination of being the youngest daughter and what my family generously called my natural talent for entertaining. It started innocently enough. When I was 16 and Mom broke her wrist 2 weeks before Christmas, I stepped up to help with the cooking. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. "You're so good at this, honey," she'd said, watching me juggle 3 dishes while she directed from her recliner. "Maybe you should take over the big meal this year." That was 7 years ago, and somehow, that emergency substitution had become my permanent life sentence. Every year, the same routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. October would arrive, and with it, the first text from my sister Linda. "So excited for Christmas dinner at your place again. Can you do that amazing stuffing?" November brought calls from my brother Mike. "Hey, can you make sure to have those little appetizer things ready when we get there?" The kids love them. By December, the floodgates opened. Mom would send detailed lists of everyone's dietary preferences. Dad would remind me about his need for low-sodium options. And my sister-in-law Jennifer would passive-aggressively suggest menu modifications, while simultaneously asking me to accommodate her mother, who she'd invited without asking. The worst part wasn't the cooking. I actually enjoyed that. It wasn't even the expense, though feeding 18 people every year had seriously impacted my savings. It was the complete and utter lack of appreciation, the way my family treated me like a catering service rather than a person who might also want to enjoy the holidays. Last Christmas, I'd spent 3 days shopping, 2 days prepping, and the entire morning of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day cooking. I'd made a turkey, a ham, 3 vegetable sides, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, dinner rolls, and 2 desserts. I'd decorated my apartment, bought all the wine, set up a beautiful table for 18 people, and even provided party favors for the kids. My family arrived like a hungry horde, barely acknowledging the spread before diving in. "The turkey's a little dry this year," my Aunt Carol had announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Maybe next time cook it breast side down?" Linda immediately chimed in with, "Oh, and could you make the stuffing less salty next year?" It's hard to taste anything else. I'd stood in my kitchen, washing dishes while listening to them critique my efforts in the next room, and I'd felt something inside me crack. When they'd all left, taking containers of leftovers without a single thank you, I'd sat alone in my devastated apartment and cried. Not just from exhaustion, but from the dawning realization that I'd become nothing more than unpaid help to the people who were supposed to love me most. The breaking point came at Easter. Despite my subtle hints about wanting to take a break from hosting, my family had simply assumed I'd be cooking again. When I'd gently suggested that maybe someone else could host this year, my mother had laughed. "Don't be silly, dear. You're so much better at this than the rest of us. Plus, your apartment is perfect for entertaining." "But I've been doing it for 7 years straight," I'd protested. "Maybe Linda could." "Linda's too busy with the kids," Mom had cut me off. "And you know Jennifer doesn't cook. Besides, you enjoy it." That was the moment I realized the horrible truth. They'd convinced themselves that I loved being their personal chef because it was easier than acknowledging they were taking advantage of me. They turned my willingness to help into an expectation, then an obligation, and finally into an assumed role that I apparently had no choice in. I'd spent the next several months building resentment like sediment in my chest. Every family gathering reinforced the dynamic. When my cousin got engaged in June, guess who got volunteered to cater the engagement party? When Dad's birthday rolled around in August, suddenly my famous potato salad was essential for the barbecue. I was the family's go-to solution for any event requiring food. But when my own birthday came around in September, I'd gotten a group text. "Happy birthday. What should we bring to your party?" I hadn't even planned a party. By October, when the first tentative Christmas planning texts started arriving, I'd made my decision. I was going to show my family exactly what Christmas looked like without their designated servant, but I wasn't going to tell them. Oh no, that would give them time to make other arrangements, to minimize the impact, to somehow turn it back around on me for not communicating clearly. I was going to let them plan their perfect Christmas around my assumed participation, and then I was going to disappear. The planning phase felt deliciously subversive. Every time Linda texted about menu items or Mom called to discuss guest counts, I responded with non-committal agreement. "Sounds good," became my standard response. "We'll see what happens." When pressed for specifics, I'd deflect. "Let me think about it and get back to you." Meanwhile, I was making very different plans. I researched Christmas vacation packages and found a perfect week-long cruise departing December 23rd. 7 days in the Caribbean, with all meals included, spa treatments, and absolutely no family members. I booked it in early November and felt a thrill of rebellion that I hadn't experienced since I was a teenager sneaking out to parties. The beauty of my plan was in its simplicity. I wasn't going to make a grand announcement or send a dramatic letter. I was simply going to not be there. They'd all show up to my apartment expecting their feast, and instead they'd find dark windows and a locked door. As December approached, the family communications intensified. Linda sent me her usual detailed list of menu requests. Mike asked about wine pairings. Jennifer helpfully forwarded an article about alternative stuffing recipes, in case I wanted to try something new. Mom called to confirm I had enough chairs for Uncle Bob's new girlfriend. Dad reminded me that he'd be arriving early to help, which historically meant sitting in my kitchen drinking beer while I cooked around him. With each interaction, my resolve strengthened. They were all so certain of my participation, so comfortable with the assumption that I'd once again sacrifice my own holiday for their convenience. None of them had asked if I was okay with hosting. None of them had offered to help with costs or preparation. They'd simply built their Christmas plans around my assumed labor, as they had for 7 years. 2 weeks before Christmas, I started the practical aspects of my disappearance. I told my landlord I'd be traveling and arranged for mail to be held. I packed carefully, including several books I'd been wanting to read and a new wardrobe of summer clothes. Most importantly, I wrote a detailed letter explaining my decision and placed it in an envelope marked "Do not open until Christmas Day." The letter was perhaps the hardest part of my plan. I wrote and rewrote it dozens of times, trying to strike the right tone between explanation and accusation. The final version read, "Dear family, if you're reading this, it means you've arrived at my apartment expecting Christmas dinner and found me gone instead. I want you to know that this wasn't a spontaneous decision or a last-minute emergency. I've been planning this for months. For 7 years, I have cooked, cleaned, decorated, shopped, and hosted every major family holiday. I have spent thousands of dollars and countless hours creating beautiful celebrations for all of you. In return, I have received criticism, requests for modifications, and the assumption that this was somehow my job. Not once in 7 years has anyone asked if I wanted to host. Not once has anyone offered to take over so I could be a guest instead of a servant. You've all become so comfortable with my free labor that you've forgotten I'm a family member who might also want to enjoy the holidays. When I tried to suggest alternatives, I was dismissed. When I expressed any hesitation, I was guilt-tripped. You convinced yourselves that I loved doing this because it was easier than acknowledging you were taking advantage of me. I am currently on a cruise ship in the Caribbean, eating meals prepared by someone else, and not doing dishes for the first time on Christmas in 7 years. I won't be back until January 2nd. I hope you figure out your dinner arrangements and perhaps gain some perspective on what it takes to create the holiday magic you've all taken for granted. Sarah P.S. There's a stack of takeout menus on the kitchen counter. The days leading up to my departure were surreal. Family members continued to text me about last-minute details, completely unaware that I was mentally already gone. The night before my cruise, as I was doing final packing, Linda called to ask if I needed her to bring anything. "Just yourselves," I said, which was technically true. "You sound weird," she said. "Are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I replied. And for the first time in months, I actually meant it. I left for the airport early on December 23rd, feeling lighter with each mile between myself and home. By the time my flight took off, my phone was already buzzing with texts about arrival times and last-minute guest additions. I turned it off and didn't look at it again until we were well out over the ocean. The cruise ship was everything I'd hoped for and more. My cabin had a balcony overlooking the endless blue of the Caribbean. The dining room served elaborate buffets that I could enjoy without having cooked a single dish. For the first time in years, I was truly relaxed during the holiday season. Meanwhile, based on the messages I'd later discover, chaos was unfolding back home. Christmas Eve brought the first wave of panic. My brother Mike had arrived early with his family, expecting to find me deep in preparation mode. Instead, he found a locked apartment and no answer to his increasingly frantic knocking. His first texts were confused. "Hey, where are you? We're here early to help set up." When I didn't respond, the messages escalated. "Sarah, this isn't funny. Where are you? The kids are asking about cookies." By evening, when more family members began arriving for what had become a tradition of Christmas Eve appetizers at my place, the confusion turned to panic. Linda called me 17 times. Mom left increasingly frantic voicemails. Dad, who apparently had never learned my apartment number, was wandering around my building asking neighbors if they'd seen me. The beauty of my plan was that no one had my spare key except the building manager, who was conveniently out of town for the holidays. They couldn't get into my apartment to even find the letter until Christmas morning, when Linda finally convinced the emergency maintenance guy that there might be a family crisis. Christmas Day brought the discovery of my letter and, according to the 127 messages I'd later find on my phone, a complete meltdown of family dynamics. My phone had become a digital war zone of anger, guilt trips, and desperate bargaining. From Linda: "I can't believe you'd do this to us. Mom is crying. The kids don't understand where you are. How could you be so selfish?" From Mike: "This is beyond irresponsible, Sarah. We all had to scramble to find somewhere to eat. Do you realize what you've put everyone through?" From Mom: "Sweetheart, I don't understand what's happened. Please call me. We can work this out. Christmas isn't the same without you." From Dad: "Your mother is heartbroken. I hope you're happy." From Jennifer, who I'd never been particularly close to: "I always knew you were dramatic, but this takes it to a whole new level." Even extended family got involved. Aunt Carol, the same woman who'd criticized my turkey, left a message saying I was destroying family traditions and being incredibly immature. But mixed in with the anger and guilt trips were messages that showed some people were beginning to understand. My cousin Emma, who was about my age, texted, "Honestly, I always wondered how you managed to do all that every year. Maybe this will wake everyone up." Uncle Bob's message was surprisingly supportive. "Kid, I've been watching you run yourself ragged for years. Good for you for finally putting yourself first." The most revealing messages came as the day progressed and the reality of their situation set in. Linda texted, "We ended up at Denny's for Christmas dinner." Denny's, Sarah. The kids are devastated. Mike wrote, "Do you have any idea how hard it is to find a restaurant open on Christmas Day? We're eating Chinese takeout in Mom and Dad's living room." Mom's final message of the day was a masterpiece of manipulation. "I hope wherever you are, you remember that family is supposed to come first. Your father and I didn't raise you to abandon the people who love you." I read all of these messages while sitting on my balcony, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink, sipping a tropical drink I hadn't had to mix myself. Each angry text only reinforced that I'd made the right decision. They were furious that their unpaid caterer had quit, but not one message acknowledged that they'd been taking advantage of me for years. The days that followed brought a fascinating evolution in the family response. The initial anger gave way to bargaining as they realized I might not return to my usual role. Linda offered to help more next year. Mike promised to contribute to expenses. Mom suggested we could share the hosting duties. But it was too little, too late, and their offers revealed how little they actually understood about what they'd been asking of me. Linda's offer to help more was laughably vague. Mike's promise to contribute to expenses ignored the hundreds of hours of labor involved. Mom's suggestion of sharing duties still assumed I'd be the primary organizer. The real revelation came from Jennifer, of all people, who sent a surprisingly honest message on December 28th. "I tried to calculate what it would have cost us to hire a caterer for Christmas dinner for 18 people. The estimate was over $2,000, not including all the decorating and setup. I never realized how much money you must have been spending on us every year. And the time? God, Sarah, how did you manage all that prep while working full-time?" It was the first message that treated me like a person rather than a malfunctioning appliance. Meanwhile, I was having the vacation of a lifetime. I snorkeled in crystal-clear waters, took cooking classes where someone else taught me new techniques, read 4 books cover to cover, and had conversations with strangers who knew nothing about my family dynamics. I remembered what it felt like to be Sarah, the person, not Sarah, the holiday coordinator. On New Year's Eve, as I watched fireworks over the ocean, I realized that my revenge had been more successful than I'd imagined. I hadn't just disrupted their Christmas, I'd forced them to confront their own behavior. Some of them were angry, but others were beginning to understand what they'd been taking for granted. When I returned home on January 2nd, I found my apartment exactly as I'd left it, plus a small mountain of flowers, cards, and gift baskets that had been delivered in my absence. The messages from family members had shifted from angry to conciliatory to genuinely apologetic. Linda had left a handwritten letter that began, "I'm sorry. I really, truly didn't realize what we'd been putting you through until I tried to organize a replacement dinner, and it was an absolute disaster. Can we talk?" Mike had left a check for $500 with a note. "For 7 years of groceries I never offered to pay for." Most surprisingly, Mom had left a card that said, "You were right to leave. I forgot somewhere along the way that you're my daughter, not my caterer. I love you, and I'm sorry." The phone calls that followed were difficult but necessary conversations. For the first time in years, my family was forced to see our holiday traditions from my perspective. Some of them, like Linda and Mom, were genuinely remorseful and eager to make changes. Others, like Jennifer and Aunt Carol, remained defensive but were outvoted by the majority who wanted to repair our relationships. We established new ground rules for future holidays. Hosting would rotate among family members. Costs would be shared. No one person would be responsible for planning entire celebrations alone. Most importantly, we would ask rather than assume when it came to volunteer labor. The following Christmas was different in every way that mattered. Linda hosted, and I arrived as a guest with a single side dish and a bottle of wine. I sat in someone else's living room while they bustled around the kitchen. I played with the kids instead of being too busy cooking to interact with them. For the first time in 8 years, I enjoyed Christmas dinner. Looking back, I realized my Christmas cruise wasn't just revenge. It was a necessary reset of family dynamics that had become toxic through years of small assumptions and overlooked imbalances. Sometimes people need to lose something completely before they understand its value. My family learned that holiday magic doesn't just happen, it requires work, planning, money, and sacrifice. They learned that taking someone's contributions for granted is a good way to lose those contributions entirely. Most importantly, they learned that love should be expressed through consideration and appreciation, not exploitation. As for me, I learned that setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you human. I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable people's worst behaviors, even when those people are family. And I learned that I was worth more than being someone's unpaid holiday staff. This past Christmas was our second with the new system, and it's everything our old celebrations never were: collaborative, appreciative, and genuinely joyful. Everyone contributes, everyone helps, and everyone gets to enjoy the results. And if anyone ever tries to volunteer me for something without asking again, well, I've got the number for that cruise line saved in my phone. Sometimes the best gift you can give your family is showing them who you really are when you stop doing things you don't want to do. Sometimes love means teaching people how to love you back properly. Sometimes revenge is just another word for self-respect.